This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and today is Thursday. It's June 15th, 2023. The first story I want to cover today has to do with this disinformation. It's a very interesting article, and in fact, I think a book is being written by this Daniel Klein, and it's a very good. I think it's going to be a very good book. It's over on the Brownstone Institute. And what it is talking about is disinformation. And the major theme of the book is that disinformation is the stamp of disinformation has become the way the world gets us to shut up. In other words, anything this is a technique that's been used by Nazism, Stalinism, Maoism. It's something I'm covering in my new book, which will be out soon, on the truth about neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy. But this book is, what Daniel Klein is writing about is, I think, very important, that these are kind of Orwellian tools that anti-liberals wield in the hopes of thinking out wrong-think, anything that doesn't agree with them. For example, the climate, election integrity, the origins of the coronavirus, therapeutics such as ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. I'm very familiar with that. I got into major issues with the hydroxychloroquine during the pandemic. I knew Dr. Zelenko quite well and supported him strongly. It did work. That's why the government wanted to ban it, I guess. The effectiveness of masking, all these lies were being told, the effectiveness of COVID injections, the safety of COVID injections, the effectiveness of lockdowns. Anti-misinformation could be deployed in keeping with whatever the next current thing might be, the next slogans we're up against with, the memes, the narratives that are being created by the left to really imprison us. It's a mind control form of warfare, actually. I want to read a quotation one of my co-authors sent me this morning, which I think is a very good quotation. It's from H.L. Mencken, who was an American journalist, writer, a very brilliant one. He lived from 1880 to 1956. So the most dangerous man to any government is the man who is able to think things out for himself. Almost inevitably, he comes to the conclusion that the government he lives under is dishonest, insane, and intolerable. Well, that's as true today as it was when he wrote it. So, Chris, if we can show this video, I'd like to. This is from Newsmax, and just go ahead and roll it. I think it's a very, very good clip. Go ahead, Chris. You can start playing it.
Did that. You got to admit, not too many people did that. The legal analysts, they did it. They skimmed it. But you don't have to be a lawyer to look at this and know that it's a scam. Number one, in that indictment, they put some
Trump indictment. The Trump indictment.
Scare us. Ooh, look at all these boxes. The classified documents in the boxes. These pictures are actually in the indictment. And there are dozens and dozens of boxes. So I went through the indictment and saw that how many documents, classified documents, did the FBI actually recover? 102. 102. So everybody, I got a box right here. All right. This is one box. And inside I have 600 pages. That's 600 pages. From Staples, this is 500. And this, I opened another, this is about 100 right here. Can I see those pictures again? Why were they in the indictment? Why were they wall-to-wall television? Why? Because they want to put it in everybody's head, potential jurors' heads, that this stuff is full of classified material. It's not. One box, you can, not even one box. That, I think, is kind of major. Maybe that's just me, but I saw something else in this indictment.
That was Greg Kelly, and I just want to show that because it fits right in with this theme of misinformation, that, in fact, the government is trying to create the impression that that Donald Trump's indictment is a case involving classified documents. It's not. He's not being charged with mishandling classified documents. Hillary Clinton should have been charged with that. She had her server, private server, when she was Secretary of State. She wasn't using the government watched and controlled means of communication for security. She clearly broke the law. Huma Abedin, her assistant, started posting Hillary's classified State Department emails on her Yahoo email account. So anyone who got Huma Abedin's email password, username, and password could read those classified documents. I wonder if she was selling them or just using them to boost revenue for the Clinton Foundation. Of course, she's a Democrat, so she was not touched. Now, by the way, when I say we need to get rid of the Department of Justice, I want to make it clear. I talk about raising the building and pouring salt on the earth. I don't mean that literally. Anyone who thinks I'm encouraging everybody to go attack the Department of Justice, I'm not. I think the protests right now, and I'm going to make this theme throughout this video, protests are the wrong thing to do in terms of the government's going to watch, identify. We need to go work through constitutional means. We need to start with the local school boards, get involved with the local school boards. If you do, you can get the woke agenda. Teaching kindergarten children about sex is absolutely insane. They have no clue what you're talking about. They're not prepared or to even comprehend what sex is about. And yet we're deriving this insane pagan agenda, and it's exposed. We need to expose it in terms of how the results are going to be so dramatically painful and so dramatically insane that that's the aim here, is to expose the insanity, not to protest, I want the Department of Justice reformed or closed down. Yes, close it down, move the entire bureaucracy to Death Valley. That's my first choice. But this has got to be done in a way that's spiritual, not political protests. That's why I say God can intervene, but we've got to repent. We've got to come around to realizing that we've let this insanity get here. It's not fighting taking God out of the schools, which started with the Supreme Court in the 40s. We should have been fighting that then. But the Trump indictment is really about the Presidential Records Acts, and it's really not even about that. Evidently, the indictment is under the Espionage Act. I'm going to have to write something about this over the weekend in the American Thinker, because Eugene Debs, the labor leader, as I pointed out yesterday, was indicted in 1917. He was a socialist and he was opposed to war. Of course, today's socialists want to go to war in Ukraine. They want to go to war, fight Russia. They're insane because they make money from the arms dealers. I think our Congress is the best Congress you could buy and sell. And Joe Biden is the best president the Chinese and the Ukrainians and every other criminal in the world can own by money. I wrote a book about 2011 or 2012 called America for Sale. I was foreseeing it happening then. It's happening now. So the indictment is one that is on the most flimsy grounds. Now, Trump is also having, Alan Dershowitz is reporting today in the Gatestone Institute that Trump is having difficulty finding a lawyer because all the lawyers, there's evidently this leftist project, this lawfare, that is threatening to find something in any lawyer that will represent Donald Trump that they can get an indictment against that lawyer. This has not happened since the 1950s, when lawyers who represented the communists that Joseph McCarthy was exposing in the government, in movies, etc., no lawyer would represent them. Well, these are, John Adams was a lawyer, was representing some British soldiers, and he had the same problem. Donald Trump, I don't care how much people hate him, he's former president of the United States. He deserves top quality legal help. This lawfare is insidious, and it needs to be exposed and stopped. And what it does is it produces bogus cases on fringe law theories, which this one is, because there's no substance here. But Donald Trump needs good representation, top quality legal representation, to make that case in court. And some good lawyers have got to come forward and be willing to have the courage of their convictions. Believe me, I know it's hard. I faced the Mueller prosecutors. They wanted to put me in prison. They thought I had connections to Julian Assange, which I didn't. They were going to say I was lying. They gave me a plea deal. If I bent on that plea deal, their case would have been made against Donald Trump. Said, see, Corsi lied. He really had a source. He just wouldn't tell you who it is. I didn't have a source. I understood and on my own figured out that Assange had Podesta's emails before he released them. I did tell Roger Stone and others what I thought was in them, and I turned out to be right. But it wasn't because I had a source. I was never indicted. But I went through 2 years of absolute hell with CNN parked outside the door waiting to watch me be arrested. I know what it's like to go through this. We're dealing with a government here that is completely criminal. And the next story I want to cover, I think, will even make that point further. This was astounding to me that there is now a declassified study that has been that's out there that the U.S. government has been purchasing information on U.S. citizens. Wired carried this story, and what the government has found is that, and they're violating all the laws which limit the ability of our intelligence agencies to collect information on U.S. citizens. But because Congress has basically been inactive and has not really done its duty in following through to make sure that the CIA and all the other intelligence agencies, the NSA, National Security Agency, all these secret groups collecting data with massive computer capabilities. Director of National Intelligence should respond to this and get involved if we had one. Of course, all these people are corrupt in this whole deal. What they do is they buy information. They get credit card information. They're saying as long as they're buying the information from its public sources, then they're not spying to collect the information. And that's their lawfare way. Lawfare is using the law to destroy the law, using the law to destroy the Constitution, using the law as a weapon to destroy capitalism, to destroy democracy, to undermine the family, to advance this woke agenda. So as long as they buy the information, and just think about it for a minute, what they're buying is they're buying credit card information, so every transaction you make, and they're buying your cell phone data that has in it the geo-positioning, so they can know where you've been every minute you have that cell phone with you. And what they're doing is monitoring it to see if you've been at protests. So if you carry your cell phone into a protest, the government wants to monitor that protest. They're going to look for everybody whose cell phones show they were there. And you'll be detected. So the government monitoring U.S. citizens are now in control of everybody's locational data to know every minute, every instant by cell phones where people are. And this data is massive and it's intrusive because they can tell where you've been, what you've spent, what you like, what you don't like, what you do, where you've been, what causes you're supporting. And then they can basically track, if they want to, through your IP address, what you're looking at in your computer. When I was in front of the Mueller prosecutors, they said they could tell the keystrokes I was making when I was writing an article. They had that ability to monitor my laptop while I was using it. Now, if that doesn't frighten you, I don't know what will. Chris, would you want to comment on all this?
Oh, we are taking political prisoners, just like the old Soviet Union. We're following and monitoring dissidents. We're creating our own Sakarovs and Solzhenitsyns, which, by the way, Trump is on track to become one of those. They're making him a martyr. But the idea of this whole not allowing a lawyer to, or trying to find a way to not allow a lawyer to represent him, that's interesting too, because this is not the first time this has happened. The "you'll never work in this town again" when it comes to Trump. Remember the inauguration ball. Hollywood types were saying, if you entertain at this place, if you entertain at this man's inauguration because it was supposed to be her turn and he took it, you will have trouble finding work. That's what's going on. And that's going to continue in this country. A new form of Soviet dictatorship through, as you've pointed out before, an oligarchy with marionetting the government.
They always do this. The socialists always do this. It's They want this kind of control over everything. Let's look at a few economic stories, because again, the economics here are increasingly frightening, and I'm reminding people that this is time to get some gold. I'm going to show you why again. Already New York City this commercial real estate crisis is hitting New York City. Now, New York is saying, oh, we're not worried about it. Now, they should be. There's a 40% plunge in office space property that's projected from 2023 to 2029. It's going to cause a shortfall around $322 million to the city of New York. But they say, oh, they've got $100 billion. That's going to increase, by the way, to 1.2 billion shortfall by 2027. But New York says, well, we've got $100 billion budget, and it's only 1% of all of our tax revenue. Yeah, well, let's look at it a little bit differently. The real estate taxes provide about 30% of the $109 billion budget revenue. Offices account for 20% of the property tax revenue and 10% of the overall revenue. These office buildings not only pay taxes, but they stimulate all the other services that are around it. So in other words, the restaurants, the bars, the nail salons, theaters, etc., that rely on office workers to spend money, if offices are vacant because people are either having some kind of hybrid employment where they don't have to go to work in an office every day, they don't want to go to work in an office every day, they want to stay at home and work from their computers, which is a lot more comfortable. You can have your dog or your cat with you. You can, wear your slippers. You don't have to be in an office environment. So the whole economy will go down. And I also saw that this guy who basically he strangled, or he put a chokehold on someone in a subway car in New York City who was threatening to kill people, and now he's indicted. The guy who saved everybody in that car, former military. I don't know if he was a Marine. Chris, I'll let you comment in a minute. You might know more of the actual details. But what upset me about this story was that New York City is now the Democrats are now in control. New York City is going to be like San Francisco. It's going to be ruled by the criminals. The Democrats defund the police. Well, so they're letting out the criminals. They're letting out the rapists and the murderers. We're not screening people coming in from Mexico or the drug cartels. We're allowing the country to be criminalized, and the downtown areas are not safe. I, for instance, have no intention of riding a subway ever again in the near future. I mean, I've been around New York City now for most of my adult life, and frequently, almost every day, use the subways. They're a great way to get around the city. But today, especially to go downtown, to go to Wall Street from Midtown. But today, you don't know what's going to happen to you on a subway. You're trapped in that subway. The car is moving. You can't get out. And whoever might be deciding to kill people, rape people, rob people, harass people, what are you going to do until the next stop? And even then, getting out of the car could be problematic. It's just too dangerous. And if the cities become dangerous and the cities begin collapsing, we're going to have a massive, when this real estate starts collapsing, and I reported consistently about the hotels that are closing, the malls that are closing. San Francisco is losing its economic base with losing flagship stores like Nordstrom, Old Navy, and flagship hotels like the Hilton in Union Square, which the owners are just abandoning because the property has lost so much value. When the loan to refinance it comes due, they can't pay if they had an interest-only loan, which many commercial real estate buildings do, they can't repay the bubble at the end, which is the principal. And the whole thing collapses because it's not economically feasible to refund it, just abandon the property. Well, the banks will come after them for the value of what's lost. The bank's going to hold the bag. But as the bank holds the bag, the banks are going to start collapsing again. And I saw the Federal Reserve is saying, well, we're not going to raise interest rates this time, but it's going to be 2 years before we really start lowering them. I'm going to show you another book that I guess I've been showing a lot of books. I read a lot of books. This one, I know the authors of this one. This is a book called Surprised Again, and it comes out of the Mises Institute, Alex Pollock, Pollock. I had the good fortune to meet him. And what this book is about is that we are only capable of producing bubbles in the economy because we're pumping so much money from the federal government with $33 trillion debt rising by the minute. And the conclusion of this is in 2020, 2021, and thus far in 2022, the book came out in 2022, we have often enough been surprised again. As we reflect on these events, we're in a context of a war, Ukraine, economic war, China, dollar weaponization, people getting out of the dollar and thinking of alternative currencies for using for the world's reserve currency in international trade, high inflation, rising interest rates, deflation of everything bubble, reversal of central bank policies, continuing pension fund deficits, huge losses from student loans, worries about stagflation, and lurking worldwide, the COVID virus and its variants still with us. Bubbles, crises, manufactured crises, lies, disinformation. We're living in an age of disinformation. That's the subtitle of this trilogy I'm writing on the Great Awakening. The first book was The Truth About Global Warming, Energy, Global Warming, and Climate Change. You've got to take a look at these books. I'll pull one here. I should probably have these books in advance, but as I think about them, talk about them, I want to show them to you. That's it. That book will explain climate science to you and why it's nonsense to think that we are going to go through a catastrophe because of carbon dioxide. We exhale carbon dioxide. The Marxists think we're the Anthropocene. We're our own destruction because we exhale. This is nonsense. Carbon dioxide is what trees depend upon for growing. It's fundamental, and it's a minor. That's the second book that I'm doing. That's the sequel, and they are all subtitled "In an Age of Disinformation," which is what I'm saying we are in: lies, disinformation, and the truth about Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy is that we are living in an era where our government has become a Marxist government, and they won't admit it. They're neo-Marxist. They're not waiting for the workers of the world to arise. They're going through cultural Maoism, which is an attack on the culture. The family's not defended. Divorces are going up at rapid rates. The children are fatherless. Children are being abandoned. And please understand that this is going to collapse. It's in the process of collapsing. And I'm telling you, it'd be a good idea to get your money out of the stock market because it's going to have a massive crash. As long as the Federal Reserve keeps pumping money into it, it'll stay afloat. But there'll come a time when so many banks start collapsing, when so much commercial real estate starts collapsing. There's something like a $1.5 trillion of commercial real estate that has to be refinanced in the next year or so. Much of that will not be able to be refinanced. Much of it, we're going to have abandoned buildings in our major cities that are big office towers that used to be occupied before COVID or when Donald Trump was president. Of course, Trump is not the solution to everything. He let Fauci come in and tell him lies and shut down the economy in a lockdown, which was absolutely the wrong thing to do. And at that time, I was trying to encourage him not to do that. But I guess when the health officials come in and lie to you and say, 8 million people are going to die if you don't make this decision, or 20 million are going to die, whatever number they came up with, they had some extraordinary numbers, 40 million, 50 million people. They were just outrageously, the economic models they were running on COVID were as corrupt as the climate models they're running to show the earth is warming up and we're all going to burn up. It's nonsense. And so Swiss America is on the site as one of our sponsors. They've got this Walking Liberty $50 offer where you can get silver coins, real silver coins. Coins today are like tinny. If you can get up to 250 of these silver dollars, basically at the price of the silver is going to appreciate faster than gold. And if you go to our sponsors, Chris is showing you how to do it. Just fill out the form. Talk to Swiss America. You've got to start thinking about having some gold, because when the dollar devalues, which it's doing right now, food and energy prices are still going up, and you can't rely on inflation stopping. It's not, when we're spending this much money, it's going to continue. Get your IRAs and your 401ks at least partly into gold, but don't try to do it yourself. Do it with expert advice, because if we don't follow the rules, the IRS will come along and disqualify your tax exempt status in your 401k or your IRA. But having IRAs and 401ks in mutual funds that are investing in the stock market is a sure formula that sets yourself up for a major loss. What I'm trying to do is to prevent you from losing 20 or 30 or 40% of your retirement savings because you didn't act now. You say, well, gold is not going up very much in price. Well, if you'll read this book, it's out, you can get it now on Amazon, you'll see that last two economic crises we had in the 90s, when we had inflation, we had double-digit interest rates. Paul Volcker had to come in and clean up Jimmy Carter's mess. Gold doubled in price. 2008, 2009, when the banks collapsed, and they're going to collapse again. That was subprime real estate. Now we've got commercial real estate in the mortgage market. Gold doubled again. Gold at $2,000 an ounce, and silver priced at around $30 an ounce. These are cheap right now. And if you've got some, you're going to be able to preserve your value. You can be able to sell them at a later time and to be able to get more money for them, because the dollar, the money you're going to get, is, if you don't believe it, go to the grocery store and see how much $100 buys you today. And you'll be surprised at how little that is. Okay, so let's continue here. I want to go on to the couple of the next stories that I want to cover. Covered the one on New York City. Now let's go to Germany. And I'm seeing this phrase doom loop being used over and over again, because what the economists are realizing, and they're really kind of afraid to tell the people about it, is you get a doom loop. This is kind of like a downward spiral. In other words, we've got high interest rates and low occupancy in the commercial buildings. So it becomes a doom loop. The people who own the buildings can't refinance them. They can't pay off the loans they've got to get a new one when the loans come due. So they abandon the buildings. Now we've got downtowns that are vacant. That means the people in the restaurants, the people who are in the nail salons, the people in the bars, all the transportation that is getting into a city to go to work. All those are downward now. There's less use of them. Restaurants begin to close. Bars begin to close. Retail space begins to close. Malls begin to close. And so you get a downward spiral. What's happening in Germany? Germany has been the economic powerhouse of the EU. Well, Germany's got a shrinking and an aging population. They are no longer, they're deindustrializing, because Germany will not start back up its nuclear power. Germany's thinking, oh, well, nuclear is bad, so we have to be green. Well, they'll be green, and they'll be, woke is broke, and they're going to be broke. Because if they deindustrialize, if the factories shut down, the energy is too expensive for them to competitively produce steel or to competitively produce autos. Well, China is recognizing this, and China is right there taking advantage of it. The net zero, this next story I want to cover, the net zero winner, we have to go to net zero emissions of carbon dioxide or we're all going to die. Well, the winner here is China. In case you haven't noticed, China is going to become the world's leader in automobile production. China is posed to be right now to become the number 2 exporter of passenger vehicles, surpassing the U.S. and South Korea. Because, again, overseas shipments of cars made in China have tripled since 2020 to reach more than 2.5 million last year. And China is taking over the electric battery market, and their supply chain means that they can make electric vehicles cheaper than anywhere else. So the switch to battery in automobiles means that the motor is no longer a differentiator. This, according to Alexander Close, who's the executive vice president for overseas productions at Always Automobiles Company. And essentially, and he is, right, saying that when we went to these electric vehicles, we gave China an economic advantage, that China is going to dominate that market, and they're going to produce, they're already producing about 50% of the world's electric vehicles. They've got companies like Ford, which recently announced that it's going to lose more than $6 billion on its latest electric vehicle plants when it gets them running. The company CEO saying, we cannot continue to import batteries and rare earth minerals from overseas. Now, at the same time, Biden wants to mandate that 3/4 of, 60-some percent of all cars, I think it's 67% of all cars manufactured in just a few years from now, have to be electric vehicles. They do that by the EPA changing the emission standards so only an electric vehicle could meet them, not counting all the emissions that were spent getting that electricity produced in the first place. But while Biden is mandating electric vehicles, at the same time, the other agencies are mandating that we can't go after mining in the United States any of the rare minerals. We don't. The EVs require 9 elements, and they're listed here. Basically, graphite, aluminum, nickel, copper, steel, manganese, cobalt, lithium, and iron. Almost all of these elements that will be needed in massive quantities to produce a U.S. electric vehicle boom are controlled by foreign countries, especially the top adversary, China. Mining is a major business operation that requires years to develop at high business risk, and the United States controls few of the needed raw materials. China mines and refines 82% of the world's graphite. It also consumes 1/3 of the graphite extracted by the world's next largest supplier, which is Madagascar. There's been no graphite mining in the United States since the 1950s and no plans for getting any more. China produces nearly 60% of the world's aluminum, and all other product producers pale in comparison. Aluminum is used in enormous number of product applications, and almost all the U.S. needs are met by imports, primarily from Canada. But it's likely only Canada can provide the quantities necessary for U.S. mass EV battery production. Potential increased production from South America is meeting stiff environmental opposition. So at the same time, we need to, we're going to be mandated by these bureaucrats to have electric vehicles. We're going to also be mandated by the same bureaucrats that you can't produce them in the United States. The entire woke agenda is suicidal. And as I say, to start this program, the misinformation, the lies, you're being fed constantly lies every day. If it's come to the point where the president of the United States, Biden, says something, the best thing to do is just assume he's lying and try to figure out why. Why is he lying? Because that's all we're getting right now. Biden gave a speech. He said we were going to build a railroad across the Pacific, I think to India or something. I mean, this guy is nuts. This guy is demented. He said, I'm going off script and I'll get into trouble. This guy's like a wind-up puppet. He's not the president of the United States running things. The big guy is Obama. That hasn't changed. And I think the plan is going to be to run Michelle. Certainly, I doubt if the Congress has the courage to impeach Biden, even with the Republicans controlling the House of Representatives. You saw how many Republicans sided with the Democrats. They would not censure Adam Schiff. We've got the Democrats and the Republicans are one party. We do not they're all the same, and they're all bought and sold. Mitch McConnell is owned by China equally as is Biden. Mitch McConnell's wife, Elaine Chao, Chinese, has a family in China that's worth millions of dollars. That family would not be alive today if Mitch McConnell wasn't doing exactly what the Chinese want. Chris, you want to comment? We need to wrap this up. We've covered a lot of ground today.
As we did. I remember Bill Clinton a long time ago, and I think it was him. I'm sure it was him. He said to the effect that he longs for the day that the U.S. is not the most powerful country in the world. Of course, he was president during the rise of globalism in the 1990s after the New World Order was proclaimed by both previous President George H.W. Bush and Prince Charles, if you will, one of the first spokesmen of the so-called New World Order, but what we see now in the is the globalist movement.
Along with John Kerry, and they're both big activists on climate
nobody
change.
listens to John Kerry.
Oh no, the Iranians do. They're very fond of John Kerry.
Just like the socialist rank and file. You're interested in handing me money for absolutely nothing, then I'm going to listen. That's why.
Well, it's gotten to that point, and what the socialists want to do in this universal guaranteed income. I mean, these things are insane, and they will be destructive, and it's a path of destruction that we're on. Donald Trump is right. We are a nation in decline, and that decline is going to come painfully, and I think a deep recession is built in at this point. It's no longer avoidable. It may be postponed a little while by printing more money, but that will only stimulate more inflation, and the Fed will have to go back to raising interest rates, which will be another downward loop, doom loop. By the way, mentioning Clinton, it was Amy Berman Jackson, the judge, who probably set the basis for Trump being exonerated. Trump is going to win this case. We can just find a judge in Miami who is not woke, a jury that is not 100% woke, and a lawyer who will dare to risk their career to represent him, which is amazing to me. The country has come to a point where this lawfare, which is using a Marxist using the law, and Larry Tribe at Harvard was one of the engineers of this, real smart guy, resentful because he didn't get appointed to the Supreme Court by Bill Clinton. So he decided to just destroy the country. I mean, I don't understand Larry Tribe in terms of his lawfare. I mean, I knew him when I was young. I admired him, and he was, of course, always leftist. But he had great abilities, but he's turned them to a direction where he's joined the group that decides that hating America is appropriate. If America goes, the last refuge on earth of freedom will die. Now, that doesn't mean it'll be gone forever, but it means a very, very dark period for human history is looming. And I've come back to be active again because I want to encourage that the real message here is that we now need God's help to turn this around. In the end, God always wins. God will win here too. Amy Berman Jackson, the Bill Clinton case on classified documents, said the president basically can do anything what he wants to do with documents. He wasn't really controlled. It's for the others that beneath the president can declassify anything he wants to declassify. And the sham prosecution of Trump under the Espionage Act, which is a little used World War I law that should have been taken off the books long ago. It was actually the subject of my doctoral dissertation at Harvard. At any rate, in the end, God will win here. God always wins. You will win here too. And I encourage the spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14. Let's get on our knees and repent that we allowed God to be taken out of the schools, that we allowed all the insane attack on the culture to be codified into laws, the Defense of Marriage Act repealed, all this insanity we're going through. The nightmare will end, but it'll get worse before it does. Thank you for joining us. This is The Truth Central. And the truth is maybe something you don't want to hear, but I solidly recommend you pay attention. thetruthcentral.com. Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today is Thursday, June 15th, 2023. We're broadcasting every weekday Thank you for joining us. God bless.